So the next thing we want to look at is how to actually write a check. Um, this sounds silly, but I can't tell you how many times we have students come into school and they have to pay for something like the prom or their yearbook or their ring, and mom hands them a check and says, go ahead and do what you have to do with it. And then they hand it to us and say, yep, I have no idea what to do with this. How do I write this check? Okay. A couple of things you want to know about writing checks. Number one, you always want to use pen. You can't really write checks in pencil, or crayon, or marker. You really should do it in a pen. You definitely don't want to do it in pencil because you don't want things to be able to be erasable on the check. Number two, make sure you always record the date on the check. Number three, the payee, make sure you get the name correct. Some banks are very particular about how the check is addressed or the payee's name. Some of it is their checks and balances that the bank has to make sure that this is a valid check. So if you're writing out a check, you typically would like to ask, who should I write this out to? Maybe the person you're giving the check to is not necessarily the payee, but they're collecting on behalf of an institution or what have you. So you got to ask first. We will typically tell people when they're writing checks out to the school, make them payable to St. Edmund Prep, St. Edmund Preparatory High School, not to school, right? So get the name of the person very specifically so that they can actually cash it at their bank. You want to remember to write out the checks in the amount for the check in numbers and words, both as we talked about just before, and make sure that you sign the check. If you do not sign the check, the person you give the check to cannot do anything with it. All right, so you have to sign the check. Typically, whoever's names are on the account, the actual checking account, are the people who are allowed to sign checks out of that. So let's say you have a checking account that only you have your name on. You will be the only one who can write a check out of that account. Your brother or sister couldn't. Your mom or dad couldn't. If they put their name on the account, so maybe your dad and you have your names on the account. That way, both you can draw money out of it. So you have to just double check, and the bank will set this up for you, who will be the people who are allowed to write checks out of your account. And then finally, we ask you to record a note in the memo field. Again, the note is for you to make sure you can remember what exactly this check was for, and unless the institution wants you to record some other information in the memo field. Okay. If we were in school, I would normally have you write some checks right now, but if we just kind of maybe look at a couple of these, what would these look like? So if I asked you to write out these checks, here's what one would look like. So here is an $815 check for St. Edmund Prep for the October tuition payment. All right. So the pay to the order of, the amount, both in words and numbers. Here's the memo. The date, the last time I updated this was last year, sorry. And what is the memo here for? And then make sure that you signed it. I don't have my signature digitally in here right now. All right, so you make sure you sign that. Here is a $115.30 check to National Grid for the September electric bill. Same deal, pay to the order of National Grid. Here's the amount in words and in numbers. A memo and a signature would go right here. Maybe you're going on vacation, the Hilton San Diego Resort and Spa for $2,495.83. And here's how you write out $2,495.83. Right, write the whole thing out. Okay. Hotel reservations, maybe they'll ask you to put an account number or reservation ID number or something on there, and make sure you sign it. And then you're going to write me a check for my birthday. Thank you very much. $150. Great. Now, here is another type of way that you could write out a check. Could you take this check as it's written here and put it into the birthday card you were trying to give me? Pay to the order of cash. Could you do this? The answer is yes. Yes, you can. You can write a check out, pay to the order of cash. But the question really becomes, do you think there could be an issue with this if I wrote out a check to cash? There could be a very particular issue here. If I go back to this check for a second, the payee, the person you're writing the check to, legally, this is the only person or institution, if I go back one, the Hilton San Diego Resort and Spa are the only people who can do anything with this check. Cash it, deposit it, send it to someone else, right? They are the legal owners of this check. In this case, I would be the legal owner of this check. If I write it out to cash, because there is not a very specific name on the check, in reality, anyone could take this and cash it. So I'm not usually a fan of this. Even though this is legal and you can do it, I'm not usually a fan. Just for security, I like to try to write out checks only to places and people that I know exactly where it's going. So can you do it? Yep. Should you do it? I would be very careful writing out checks to cash. When you also write your check, if you've ever asked your parents if you've never seen this before to see their checkbook, there usually is another little notepad that's included in their checkbook. So they'll have the pad of checks that they can write, and then with it is something called the check register. The check register really does one of two things. First, it's going to help you record all the checks you write, to keep track of every single check you write and where it was supposed to go. The other thing that the check register really should help you with, and this has gotten a little bit more complicated now with all the electronic banking we have, is that in theory, as you are writing out the check register, right? So maybe I wrote this bill here, right? Check number 476, paid for utilities, whatever. This was the check was written for $37.42. In reality, what you are doing on this side of the check register is keeping a running total of how much money should be in your account. So any deposit, money that goes in, or credit, money that comes out, you should be able to record here. So here, before I wrote check 476, the balance in my account was $802.42. When I take out the $37.42 that I paid to utilities, now I only have $765 in the account. In reality, if you're keeping this up to date, every time you put money in or out of your account, there should never be a reason as to why you bounce a check. There should never be a reason why you don't know how much money is in your account or how much money you could write a check for. This is really kind of your record of the transactions that happen in your account. The bank is also going to keep track of all of the activity that they see coming in and out of your account. And when we get to the end of this unit, I'll show you a little bit. We have to make sure that you agree with what the bank says is happening in your account and vice versa, right? But it's usually a good idea that when you write a check that you make sure you record it. Oops, sorry. You make sure you record it in the register. Okay. Just want to write it down so that you know what it is. Okay. So a little while ago, or last year or so, I paid for Exploration Day and put it on my credit card because I needed one in order to fulfill the reservation we had. And I was just reimbursed. So when all the students gave me the money for the trip, I collected it, handed it into the school, and I asked to be repaid. So maybe here is the check that, here's the check that I was given. Wonderful. Now I would like to take this check and put it back in my bank account so that I can now take that $840 that I spent and be able to use it again. Okay. So how do you go about depositing a check you get? You can't just hand them the check and say, please take care of this. There's a bit of a process you need to go through in order to put the check into your account. So depositing a check. At the bank, you are going to get what we call a deposit ticket. You can nowadays you can deposit checks both via the ATM, and you can do it at a teller window. And you can even do it with your cell phone, which I'll show you in a second. But if you're going to, let's say, go to the bank and deposit a check, you want to go, and around the lobby of the bank, they will have slips you fill out called the deposit ticket. It probably looks something like this-ish. So they want to know the name on the account, what is the account number, so the checking account number, and then what deposits are being made in here. So are you putting in cash? And here's check number 2493, that's for $300, and this check, and this check, and this check. So you're kind of laying out the different individually, what checks are you depositing, and then give them a grand total of how much money you want to put into your account today. Okay, so you're going to fill out this deposit ticket. Oh, look at that. All right, so maybe I'll fill that out. So, I'm putting in $6 worth of cash, and here's the $840 check I just got from St. Emma Prep. So I'm putting in a total of $900 into my account. So you'll fill that out, and then take this slip and the checks you want and the cash you want to deposit to the teller, and they'll do that. All right. The next thing you want to do is what we call endorse the check. Here's what the deal is. On the front of the check, right, you are saying that this check belongs to me. Right, so the check you wrote for my birthday is only written out for Anthony Pinavaya. And only Anthony Pinavaya can do anything with that check. If I want the bank to do anything, like take that money and put it in my bank account, I need to give the bank permission in order to use the check that has my name on it. And how do you do that? You are basically going to sign over the check to someone else, whether it's a bank or another person. You're going to sign it off. That is called endorsing the check. And you are signing away your rights to the check and handing it over to someone else. And there are a couple of different ways you can endorse the check. Okay, the first way that you can endorse a check is with something called a blank endorsement. Basically, if you take your check and flip it over onto the back side of the check, you will see this section kind of pre-printed on the back of your check. A blank endorsement just involves you signing the check. Just sign on the top line, and that is essentially waiving your rights to this check. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this because if you do not specify where this check has to go, and for some reason someone picks this up off your desk, or if you drop it in the street and someone picks it up, you have now signed away your rights, and anyone can do something with this. So I don't recommend the blank endorsement. I do recommend what they call a restrictive endorsement. A restrictive endorsement is this. It will be your signature, then for deposit only, and the account number this check is going to be deposited into. Okay. You don't always have to deposit checks into your own checking account. You can deposit checks into any bank account you have. So if you have a checking account and a savings account, you would need to know the number of your savings account when you're doing that. This is probably the way you're always going to endorse checks. Sign them for deposit only and the account number they're going into. Okay. So not only here are you signing away your rights, but you're giving very specific directions as to what can be done with that check now. Okay, so by saying for deposit only into this account number, this is now the only thing that can happen with this check legally. Okay, so this is a good thing to get in the habit of doing. Anytime you have a check that was written out to you that you want someone else to do something with, you first have to endorse it on the back, and here's how you would do that. Okay. There's another type of endorsement, which I don't think you're going to do a lot, but you might need to. This is if you have to transfer the check to someone else. This is called a special endorsement. And here's an example. Let's say for the trip that I was collecting money for Exploration Day, someone wrote the check to me personally, not to St. Emma Prep. Right? Technically, at that point, I could not take that check and deposit it into the St. Emma Prep account because the check wasn't written to St. Emma Prep. It was written to me personally. So right now, I'm the only person who can do anything with that check. So what I would have to do is basically sign away my rights to the check and turn it over to Sandeman Prep. I could do one of two things here. I could deposit that money into my personal bank account and then write Sandeman Prep a check for the same amount, right? And then give that to Sandeman Prep, and Sandeman Prep could cash my check. That's going to take that's going to take more time than I want it to, because it'll take a couple of days for the check to clear my bank, and then I can write my check and give it to Sandeman Prep, and then I have to wait another couple of days for the check to clear for Sandeman Prep. Instead, what I can do is, without having to write another check, we can basically turn this check over to Sandeman Prep right here and now. I'm going to sign the check because it's my check, and then I'm going to basically rewrite the check right there on the back. Pay to the order of Sandeman Prep. So on the front of this check was made out to Anthony Pinabaya, and now I'm taking this check, turning it around and saying, no, I, Anthony Pinabaya, authorize that this check is now made payable to Sandeman Prep, and now Sandeman Prep could do something with this check. Okay, so three types of endorsements really. The blank endorsement, not really recommended. The restrictive endorsement is the way you're going to go. Sign it, for deposit only, and the account number. And then the special endorsement is if you had to give the check over to someone else, signature, and then pay to the order of. One of the cool things that I really, really like now is mobile deposits. I have to tell you, most of the checks that go into my bank account at this point, if I do get a check, is all going to be done on my smartphone. There's an app for a lot of banks that they offer this service. You can just download the app and install it on your phone. You log into it with your online account. And you're basically going to go through the similar process you would do at the ATM or that you do at the bank, except now you can do it from home. You will need to still endorse your check. You do have to sign it and say for deposit only and all that. This is my bank, Dime Bank. So you would be able to select the account you would like that check to go into, and you type in here how much the check is for, and then you basically take pictures of the front and the back of the check. Right, so if I was depositing this check from Sandeman Prep, I would pick my account number. The check was for $840, and then it asked me to take a picture of the front of the check. So here it is. You try to get as tight as you can on the check, and then you would take a picture of the front, a picture of the back, and then say make the deposit. Perfect. Relatively soon, that money is in your account or available. Again, usually in that 1 to 2 day period. And then once you get clearance that the bank has actually cashed the check and the money's in your account, then you can go ahead and destroy that check. I would probably shred it at that point. Mobile deposits are awesome. I like this a lot, not having to go actually to the physical bank, but once I get a check from someone, I can write that in there, make the deposit right into my account.